Good. You can be seated. Thank you. Hey, Tina. Tina. Are you going to ask number? Bring them in. Good. And who's next? Oh, Susan Miller. That's right. You said that already. I'm sorry. Yes.
The jurors, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Jurors enter the courtroom.
Thank you, Deputy. Were you all able to abide by my instructions during the recess?
Yes.
All right, thank you once again. Mr. Martin?
Thank you, Your Honor. Today calls forensic science investigator Susan Miller.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
There's a couple of sweet right up to the mic. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you would, please state your first and last name for the record, and please direct all your testimony to the jury box. Here's your name.
My name is Susan Miller,
And spell your last name, please.
Miller.
All right. Now, Ms. Miller, did you do a report in this case?
Yes, sir, I did.
In the event that you feel like you need to refresh your memory from that report, please tell me, and we'll get the court's permission for you to do that. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Very good. Let's go ahead and begin. How are you employed?
I am a supervisor in forensics at Pasco County Sheriff's Office, and I'm also a human remains detection canine handler.
Okay. How long have you been a humans remain canine handler?
Approximately 3 years.
How long have you been a supervisor?
7 years.
I'm going to take you back to January 13, 2014, as far as your employment. In the beginning of 2014, January, did you hold a supervisory position?
I did not.
And how long after January were you appointed as supervisor?
It was approximately a year later.
And was there another individual who was also promoted or assigned as a supervisor approximately the same time?
There was, yes. Her name was Nancy Steffens.
Explain to us the training that you've received in order to carry out the duties as a forensic science investigator. We're going to really not talk about the canine part. That wasn't involved in this case, right?
That's correct.
That's something just in the last 3 years?
Yes.
All right, very good. So let's just concentrate on the training that you had under your belt, so to speak, in 2014. What was it that allowed you to perform the duties as a forensic science investigator?
So I had completed the forensic technology program in the year 2000, and I was hired directly after finishing that program, and so I've had approximately 1,000 hours of on-the-job training since then.
And what does on-the-job training include?
Going to various trainings through different disciplines, photography, documenting crime scenes in general, processing, etc.
Do your duties include photography?
They do.
Are you assigned a particular camera?
I am.
Now, in 2014, that's what we're going to be talking about. Were you assigned a particular camera?
I was, yes.
As far as the collection of evidence, you didn't collect any evidence at the scene at Cop Theater, correct?
Yes, I did collect evidence that day.
Photographs?
I took photographs, yes, I did.
Okay. And I'm talking about inside Theater 10.
Oh, no, sir, I did not.
I apologize, that was my fault. Okay. You were in another theater.
Correct.
All right, I'm sorry. Okay. So let's make sure we get that straight. In Theater 10, you did not participate in that process in Theater 10.
No, not of the evidence collection or photography, no.
Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about January 13th, 2014. Were you employed as a forensic science investigator on that particular day?
Yes, I was.
And your duties as you have just described?
Yes.
Did you have occasion to respond to Cop Theater at 6333 Wesley Grove Boulevard, Wesley Chapel, Pasco County, Florida?
I did.
And do you recall approximately what time you arrived?
Approximately 14:29.
All right. For those of us that aren't familiar with military time, could you convert that for us?
2:29.
Were you given a particular assignment upon your arrival?
Yes, upon arrival, I was directed to the back of the theater. I was directed to the back of the theater to meet with Detective Proctor.
Okay. Was that Theater 10 or Theater 11?
It was the adjacent theater to the east, so I believe that was 11.
Okay. Did you in fact go into Theater 11?
I did.
While in Theater 11, do you know what your assignment was going to be?
It was to document the individual that Detective Proctor was interviewing.
Do you in fact write a report about what you do?
I do, yes.
And is that report assigned a unique case number with Pasco Sheriff's Office being 14001529 for this event?
That's correct.
And your report and all the evidence you collected is under that number?
Yes, sir.
All right, we have you inside theater number 11. Does an individual that was later identified to you as Curtis Reeves brought into theater number 11?
That's correct.
And if you recognize the individual that was introduced to you as Curtis Reeves, if he's in the courtroom, would you point him out, please?
Yes, he's a gentleman sitting at the table there.
Okay.
That's a gentleman.
Let's be a little more specific. Would you
Excuse me.
please tell us at least coat color?
Stipulate to identification.
Thank you.
In this particular case, were you aware that the event in the theater included a shooting?
Yes, I was.
Now, in that type of situation, is it normal practice for you to process individuals that were part of that event,
Yes, sir, it is.
whether they be a witness or a person of interest?
Correct.
And can you tell me whether or not that normal process would include photographing and, if appropriate, the collection of items of clothing the person you were processing was wearing?
Yes, that would be correct.
We have you in Theater 11. Mr. Reeves is brought into Theater 11. What was your intention at that time, knowing that Mr. Reeves was a person of interest?
My intention was to photograph the individual and to collect swabs from the hands, to collect a GSR kit, do fingernail scrapings and cuttings, and then collect the clothing.
Now, we're going to get some administrative stuff out of the way real quick, so we can just concentrate on your testimony, okay? You indicated that you took a swab.
That's correct.
All right. Would that be a buccal swab?
I did, yes.
Explain to the jury what a buccal swab is.
A buccal swab is simply a large Q-tip that we use, and we go along the inner lining of the teeth and gums, and that's for the collection of cells to be used at a later date and time.
Is a swab a sterile swab?
It is, yes.
Once that collection is made, first of all, how do you handle the sterile swab? Is it just like a cotton ball, is something on a stick? That's why give me a visual.
Oh, it's like a Q-tip, a large Q-tip.
All right, very good. Now, once that's the material is collected by swabbing inside the mouth, what do you do with that?
Those swabs are then placed back into the package that they came in, and then that is sealed with evidence tape and then placed appropriately in a paper bag.
Now, because it's biological material, why do you use a paper bag?
Well, we use a paper bag because you want any kind of material that may be moist, any kind of biological material, to be in a bag that can breathe. So you wouldn't want to put it into plastic where mold could grow on it.
Okay. And did you, in fact, perform that function and take and utilize a sterile Q-tip and put it in Mr. Reeves' mouth?
That's correct.
And in the manner that you just described?
Yes, sir.
And did you subsequently put that into evidence?
I did.
Along with other items of clothing, did you have an occasion while you were there during the process to secure Mr. Reeves' shoes?
Yes.
And how did you secure those, and what did you do with them?
Once the shoes were removed, they were also placed into a brown paper bag and sealed.
Approach the witness, Sean.
You may.
Can I speak to Mr. Martin's question?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Approach the witness, Sean.
Go ahead.
Let me show you what's been marked for identification with the letters G, G, G.
Your Honor, we can stipulate the admission to evidence of that item whenever the prosecutor is ready to
All right.
request that of the court.
Thank you.
What's the next number in order?
50.
Okay. Let me show you State's Exhibit number 50. Would you go ahead and open the bag?
I forgot to.
Thank you. Would you like me to remove the item?
First of all, it's already in evidence. So is that Mr. Reeves' shoe reflected?
Yes, it is one shoe.
One shoe.
Correct.
All right, will you go ahead and pull it up? And Your Honor, may the witness step down and allow the jury very briefly to look at the shoe, and so they make whatever observations they want to make.
Yes, the shoe will be admitted as number 50, and she can show 'em.
Of course, Your Honor, they'll get to see it later. Go ahead and place that back in the plan, please. You just stay right there. And now, after the clothes were taken, was Mr. Reeves provided some type of clothing to wear for the remainder of the processing?
Yes, he was placed in a Tyvek suit, which is just a white protective suit.
Now, prior to him being placed in that particular suit, did you do some photographing of Mr. Reeves?
I did,
And where did that take place?
within the theater.
When the photograph processing took place, did it begin before you seized Mr. Reeves' clothes?
Yes, it did.
Would the photographs that you took then depict the clothes he was wearing at the time he was brought into theater number 11?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, we mentioned that you had a camera, right?
That's correct, yes.
Is that particular camera digital or film?
That's a digital camera.
Let's talk about that just a little bit. That particular camera being a digital camera, can you tell us whether or not that camera, other than recording the photograph that is taken, along with taking the photograph, tell us whether or not it simultaneously records other data associated with that photograph?
Oh, it does. It records metadata.
All right, and what is metadata?
Metadata is information that more or less is embedded into the image, so you are able to look up some information such as your shutter speed, your ISO, or the time and the date.
All right, when you say the time, what time are we talking about?
We're talking about the actual time of the picture being taken.
Okay, the actual time that the shutter opens and closes.
Correct.
It records the time.
Yes.
Right. Does that time have to be set manually when the camera is first put in use?
It does.
And in this particular case, was that particular camera, whether you set it or someone else, was the camera set up so that when the picture was taken, the time of the photograph is recorded in the metadata?
Correct.
In this particular case, did you have occasion to look at the camera itself as far as the time was set and check it in some sort of way that you knew that you're in the afternoon, so the time was consistent with the time of day you were taking the photograph, consistent approximately with your watch?
Yes,
Yeah.
that information was entered into the camera when I received it.
And was it consistent with the time of day and consistent with what you knew the time specifically was when you took the picture?
Yes.
Okay. As far as the setting, did you allow the camera to automatically set the setting for the lighting conditions, or did you manually set a setting?
It was automatic, yes.
And when you took the photograph, did you use any type of external flash?
I did have an external flash on the camera.
And explain to us what an external flash is.
Well, typically on a digital camera, you have a pop-up lens that's usually built into the camera. But if you need more lighting, there is an external flash that would be mounted onto the top of a digital camera.
All right. And does the automatic setting also control the flash?
It does,
the external flash.
yes.
Approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Your Honor, likewise with these exhibits, the photographs, the defense has no objection to having those items admitted into evidence whenever the prosecutor is ready to request them to court.
Thank you, Mr. Michaels.
For the purpose of the record, I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit AAA, JPEG number 2116637. Marked for identification BBB, JPEG number 2116649. Marked for identification CCC, JPEG number 2116649. Marked for identification DDD, JPEG number 2116652. And finally, marked for identification EEE, JPEG number 2116637. Would you look at these photographs and let me know if you recognize them? Well, first, I'll give you a chance to look at each one of them.
Yes, sir, I recognize those.
Are those the photographs that you took on January 13, 2014, inside theater number 11 at the Grove Theater of Mr. Curtis Reeves?
Yes, they are.
And if the individual that you were introduced to as Curtis Reeves is in the courtroom?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I would, next in order for AAA, just for the record, will be
51,
BBB, the exhibit number.
52,
Next in order is CCC,
53,
and I think I can figure it out from there. We'll just do it. There'll be 53, the next in order will be 54, which is DDD, and the next in order, EEE, would be 55.
correct.
All right. Your Honor, so to facilitate the use of the photographs, I'm not going to use the Elmo,
Okay.
but may I stand? And now that they're in evidence, may I have the witness step down? We'll publish the jury, and if with the court's permission, continue with the testimony with the aid of the photographs. Is that acceptable, Your Honor?
Like you're going to have her pointing to it as you go along, or?
No. Well, I'm going to have her point where the metadata is so they know what we're talking about. And then it's just, she took these photographs, but she needs to explain the metadata. That's something you don't normally get with a picture.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can reposition if you need to.
Thank you.
All right, would you step down, please? And if you would stand right here, I'm going to give you State's Exhibit number 51. And who is that?
This is Curtis Reeves.
All right. Now, we talked about the metadata. Show the jury where that is and what we're talking about.
That's the information that is along the right side of the photograph. And as you can see, it has different delineations of the information there.
All right. As far as the metadata on State's Exhibit number 51, at what time on January 13, 2014, was that photograph taken?
So this is indicating that the photograph was taken at 3:44 p.m.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number 52. Again, we have the metadata. Will you show that where the jury is?
The information is right along here, and it's depicting the same thing as the previous photograph. It's got the date and the time and other specifics about the photograph.
And what time does the metadata indicate that State's Exhibit number 52 was taken?
This one says it was 4:03 p.m.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number 55, and that is a photograph of who?
This is a photograph of Curtis Reeves.
Taken on January 13th.
That's correct.
And that particular photograph depicts what part of his body?
This is the frontal view of the torso as he is sitting in the seat at the theater.
All right. Let me show you State's Exhibit number 53. You show that to the jury, and who is that?
This is also Curtis Reeves.
And that photograph represents what?
This is going to be the left side of the face.
All right. Let me show you State's Exhibit number 54. Who is that, and what does it represent?
This is Curtis Reeves, and this photograph is depicting the right side of the face.
Okay. I want you to go back to 55. What color shirt is Mr. Reeves wearing?
This is a blue button-down shirt.
Okay. And then using State's Exhibits 54 and 53, was he wearing the same blue shirt in those?
No, sir. This is the white protective suit that I mentioned earlier.
All right. And so that was taken after you seized the clothes?
Correct.
And was those two particular pictures taken contemporaneous, if you will, with State's Exhibit number 52, because we're seeing the white Kydex?
Yes, that's correct.
And let me ask you the same question with State's Exhibit number 55, comparing it to State's Exhibit number 51. We see the blue shirt. So State's Exhibit number 55, was that taken contemporaneous with the State's Exhibit 51?
Yes, that is correct. They're the same.
Have a seat. When I was introducing those photographs, you heard me refer to a number, and I said JPEG number. Remember that?
Yes.
All right. Explain to the jury where the state got that information. Why is that on that particular picture?
Well, that is part of the metadata from the camera that gets printed out on the side of that photo.
Every time the shutter flashes?
Yes, it has its own unique number, correct.
Okay. After completing that particular assignment, did you have an occasion to go to the medical examiner's office to collect evidence?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall that occurring a couple of days after?
It did. It happened on the Wednesday following.
For districts, for the medical examiner's office in this district, it covers Pinellas and Pasco.
That is correct.
Where is the medical examiner's office for this area?
It is located off Almerton Road in Largo.
And is that where you went?
It is.
Why did you go there on the 15th?
That was to respond down there and pick up items collected during autopsy and bring them back to the sheriff's office to put them into evidence.
And is that your normal procedure?
It is, yes.
Now, had the autopsy already been completed?
It had been completed.
the evidence that you collected, was that collected by the individual performing the autopsy along with maybe members of the staff?
That's correct.
All right. Is there a procedure when you go to the medical examiner's office, when you go there to collect evidence, certain forms that you have to fill out and speak to a particular individual?
Yes, you have to talk to the lab personnel who will have you sign a chain of custody form for the items. And then upon coming back to the sheriff's office, an additional chain of custody form is filled out.
All right. As we mentioned with the Pasco Sheriff's Office, based on your experience in dealing with the medical examiner's office, does the medical examiner's office give each of their case a unique number?
They do,
And you're provided with that number?
yes.
So you can cross-reference the sheriff's office number with the medical examiner's number to know that that particular evidence goes with this case.
That's correct.
Did you have make contact with a representative authorized to release evidence in this case?
Yes, sir.
All right. And did you in fact follow the procedure that you just explained?
I did.
Now, once you receive that, those items, do you repackage it in any way?
Yes, upon return to the sheriff's office, they are packaged in another brown paper bag, and then they are sealed, and then I am giving it an item number with my initials on it.
Approach, Your Honor. Let me show you State's Exhibit HHH, marked for identification, and State's Exhibit III, marked for identification. Would you look at the outside of the package and tell me whether or not you recognize that?
And again, Your Honor, defense has no objection to the addition of these items together.
Thank you.
Do you recognize both of those items?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
It has the associated case number, the date, and it has my initials and the item number. It also has my signature on the bags.
Your Honor, based on the stipulation by Mr. Michaels, the state would move into evidence HHH next in order
56,
and III.
57.
What I'd like for you to do, please, if you would, State's Exhibit number 57. Well, first of all, let me talk about State's Exhibit number 56. That's a buccal swab from the medical examiner's office,
That's correct.
and you know it to be from, the buccal swab was obtained by Chad Oulson, from Chad Oulson.
Yes,
You didn't do that.
I did not do
The
that.
medical examiner's office did.
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll just put that one aside since you didn't actually perform that. Let's look at III, which is, I'm sorry, 57. What is that?
This item is projectile fragments from chest.
Okay, would you go ahead and open that, please?
Yes.
Careful.
Let's do it this way.
Okay. Inside that item bag, do you recognize the evidence that you picked up from the medical examiner's office?
Yes, I do.
All right. And how do you recognize it?
It is labeled with the medical examiner's identification number and tape.
Very good. Can you put that back in, please? And that is what?
So this is the projectile fragments from the chest. Do you want the shoes?
Yep.
Or so?
Put that back in the bag. Just a moment now. Where- Thank you. May I have a moment with counsel?
You may.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Cross?
All right, when you responded to the Cobb Theater back in January of 2014, you met with Captain Steffens, correct?
That's correct.
And he was kind of in charge of the forensic people at the scene.
Yes, sir.
And you were tasked with what's called processing Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
To process Mr. Reeves, you went to this movie theater that wasn't being used, that was empty,
That's correct.
and wasn't the scene of whatever it was at that point they were investigating, correct?
Correct.
In terms of the number, you didn't know the number until the prosecutor told you today it was 11, right?
I knew it was adjacent to the theater that had been involved.
So 9 or 11,
Correct.
if
To
they're,
the east.
if they're numbered sequentially.
Yes.
Now, by processing Mr. Reeves, you collect his shirt,
I did.
the blue shirt we see in the photograph.
Correct.
You do some nail clippings,
I did.
right hand nail clippings and left hand nail clippings.
Correct.
And then what you do with the clippers, you actually preserve those too,
I do.
so that any of the potential biological information, DNA, et cetera, would be on the nails and also on the fingernails, on the fingernail clippers potentially, right?
That could be, yes.
Okay, and that's why you preserve that.
Correct.
You also did some scrapings under the fingernails,
Yes,
I imagine before you clip them.
exactly.
And then you do swabs of both hands,
Correct.
and you do a gunshot residue kit,
Yes.
which is essentially putting like little stickies, is that right, on fingertips?
Well, yes, what that is basically plastic canisters with an adhesive backing to them, and you use those canisters and you apply them to the backs of the hands and to the palms of the hands.
Okay, and in this case, you did just the right hand, is that right?
No, I would have done both hands.
Okay, and do you know that you did both?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also talked about this buccal swab. Let's talk a little bit about that. You described it as a Q-tip, and from what I've seen, it's kind of like, almost like a long, kind of wide coffee stirrer, right? Because it's flat.
Yes,
The item that you're collecting the buccal sample with.
correct.
And then the top is like a Q-tip, but again, it's flat and kind of wide.
It looks very similar to a large Q-tip.
Okay, but flattened.
Flattened, it has a little bit of substance there, cotton
Okay.
substance. I don't know that it's flat.
And that's because what you do is actually run it into the mouth, the gums,
Correct, yes.
the tongue, all inside the mouth, inside
All
the cheeks as
yes.
well, right?
Inside the cheeks, yes.
And that's to capture DNA,
Correct.
okay? Because that's what the buccal swab is used for. You do that collection so down the road, anybody who's wants to can use that as a sample to get DNA off of that.
Yes,
Okay. And in this particular case, you went to the theater, kind of going into the back door as opposed to going into through the lobby and all of that.
yes.
And you encountered, you said Detective Proctor?
Detective Proctor
Okay, so Proctor is the one that guided you to Mr. Reeves?
and Detective Koenig,
Okay, they were together.
yes,
And so you take Mr. Reeves into this theater to process him
that's correct.
and to take photographs as part of you processing Mr. Reeves.
It is.
And so in this case, what you do as a forensic investigator is you're going to look over the subject that you're going to photograph.
Yes,
Okay? And the things that you notice, you might make sure that you capture the best you can photographically.
yes,
In this case, what you noticed was some redness on the eyelid of Mr. Reeves.
I did.
And that's redness that you noticed, right?
I did notice that, yes.
In other words, the detective didn't instruct you, hey, he's complaining of redness, or he's complaining of an injury, look at that. This is something you did independently of anybody talking to you about it, right?
Yeah, I don't recall if there was any mention of anything like that, but I did observe that and I photographed it.
Okay, let me ask you specifically. Detectives did not point out the redness to you, right?
I don't believe they did, no.
Well, did they point out the redness to you or not?
Nobody.
She answered the question. Now it's argumentative.
Sustained.
Do you know for sure?
Your Honor, this-
I'll allow that. Overruled.
Do you know for sure?
I do not believe anybody pointed it out to me, no.
Okay. And certainly Mr. Reeves didn't point it out to you and say, my eye hurts, take a look at it.
I don't recall him doing that, no.
Well, did he?
I don't recall him doing that, no.
Okay. If I show you something, there was a hearing on this case a couple years back. If I show you something, would it help to refresh your recollection? Since you don't remember?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Page 960, line 15, court proceeding. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
All right. And I'm going to direct your attention to lines 14 through 24 to keep things in context for you, okay?
Okay, yes, sir.
All right. Your Honor, may I?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
What I showed you was some prior testimony. You recall that now?
Yes, correct.
And so, in reading that and looking at that, you would agree with me that the detective did not point it out to you,
Yes,
the redness, correct?
correct.
And Mr. Reeves did not mention it to you, correct?
Correct.
It was your observation that led you to photograph the eyelid.
It was.
Nothing further, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be released?
You'll be released by the state, Your Honor.
About defense?
She's under subpoena, so.
Okay. All right, Ms. Miller, you're free to go today. Possibility you could get called back. You'll need to come if you do.
All right, thank you.
Who's next?
Dr. John Thogmartin. Coach Your Honor, while the witness comes in.
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in this cause to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. Morning.
Good morning.
Doctor, if you would, state your name for the records. Spell your last name for the court reporter.
My name is John Russell Thogmartin, Thogmartin, first name Jon.
All right, sir. And if you would, during the course of our direct examination, if you direct your comments to the jury, and if you have an autopsy report with you, if you feel necessary to refer to it, please let me know, and we'll get the court's permission for you to do that.
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, let's start from the very beginning. What is your name,
John Russell Thogmartin.
and how are you employed?
I'm the District 6 Medical Examiner.
How many districts are there in the state of Florida for medical examiners?
24.
District 6 includes what area of the state of Florida?
It's the same thing as the 6th Judicial Circuit. It's Pasco and Pinellas counties.
Where is your office, where is the medical examiner's office located for the District 6?
It's in Largo, Florida.
Is that the only building within the district?
Yes.
And that services both Pinellas and Pasco County?
Yes.
Before we talk about you a little bit, let's talk about your lab. Along with the medical examiner's office, are there any other services that are provided out of that location?
Yes. The Pinellas County Crime Laboratory is also there, and I employ those people as well.
As far as the medical examiner's office, is your laboratory accredited?
Yes.
Explain to the jury what that is and the process you have to go through to be designated as an accredited medical examiner's office.
Well, our medical examiner office is accredited by the National Association of Medical Examiners. And what they look at is, is your building good enough to meet the standard? Do you have sufficient staffing? Is your workload commensurate with your staffing? Somebody like me, do I have appropriate board certifications? Do my staff have appropriate board certifications? Mostly just a checklist of items that make sure that you produce your work in a timely manner and up to their standard. And it's the same thing with the laboratory, the forensic laboratory, the crime laboratory. They're accredited as well by another organization, and it's a very similar, stringent, scientific, and workload standard.
Are you periodically audited to make sure that you continue to maintain those standards?
Yes.
And since obtaining that accreditation, have you been audited?
Yes.
I'm going to break it down in two different areas. As we speak today, is your medical examiner's office accredited?
Yes.
Back in 2014, was it accredited?
Yes.
Now let's talk about you a little bit, all right?
Okay.
All right. Dr. Thogmartin, give us the training and education that you have to go through so that you meet the accreditation requirements to be a medical examiner.
Well, I have a degree in medicine. I graduated from medical school in San Antonio, Texas in 1990. I then did a 5-year residency in anatomic and clinical pathology, also in San Antonio in the hospitals there. Finished that in 1995. And then I moved to Florida to do fellowship in Dade County, Florida. They have a really good fellowship program there, so that's a 6-year postgraduate training. Finished that in 96.
Okay. And as far as the degree and as far as anatomical, you use the word that maybe not everyone in this courtroom might be familiar with. What is that?
Well, I'm trained in 3 areas of pathology, and I'm board certified in each of those areas. It's anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology. And it's really kind of neat how those are separated into each other. Anatomic pathology is diagnosing things in solid human tissue, like tumors, solid tumors, breast tumors, things like that. And then clinical pathology is diagnosing things in the fluids of the human body, blood, cerebrospinal fluid, urine. So clinical is fluid, anatomical is solid, And that's the way I divide it up. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. Now, forensic pathology is actually a subspecialty of anatomic pathology, and it deals with taking the autopsy and that you learn about, in medical school, applying it to traumatic cases, and then being able to present viable scientific testimony regarding those cases in court.
And you are board certified in each of those areas.
Yes.
What does it mean to be board certified?
You take a really hard test and you pass it, and then you're board certified.
Okay. In order to maintain your board certificate, is there a continuing education that you periodically have to go through?
Well, yes, for your medical license, you have to have a certain number of continuing medical education hours. All doctors have to do that.
As we speak today, are you currently licensed in the Florida, and your license is in good standing as far as being a medical doctor?
Yes.
In 2014, the same question, were you licensed, and was your medical license in good standing as a medical doctor?
Yes.
When we talk about the services that are performed within the medical examiner's office, do you perform autopsies?
Yes.
We're going to talk about that in a little bit and define it. But is that part of your duties to perform autopsies?
Yes.
And how many do you think you performed as we speak?
5,000 plus is kind of my standard answer.
Okay. And back in 2014? Yeah.
It was about that. I mean, one time I did, many years ago, I counted up as I was at 3,500, so it's been quite a few since then. So I'd say 5,000 or so, maybe a little more by now.
Okay. In the past, have you testified and been allowed to render your opinion as to cause of death in a particular case?
Yes.
More specifically, regarding the cause of death, have you been allowed to render your opinion as to whether or not the cause of death was, in fact, a gunshot wound?
Yes.
And again, can you give us the ballpark about how many gunshot cases you've been part of and investigated?
There have been many gunshot wounds. Some of them are even multi-gunshot wounds. Most cases are suicide by gunshot wound, but it's one of the most common cause of death. I would say ballpark, it has to be near or around 1,000, I would say.
Right. When investigating as part of your performance as a forensic pathology, does each gunshot wound case you do give you an opportunity to confirm and learn how a particular projectile can affect tissue and bones within the body?
Yeah, every case, the gunshot wounds are similar, but you learn, basically what tissues are dense enough to stop a bullet, what it takes, with different calibers, and you learn a little something with every single case you perform.
Right. And would that also include those things that over the years and based on that experience, that as a forensic pathologist, as we speak today, you can assist the jury as far as determining the path and direction of a projectile through the skin?
Yes.
Okay, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, but that's how you acquire that information, is through years of experience.
Yeah, training, experience, education, yes.
We're going to spend some time talking about the autopsy and the finding in the autopsy. I will be using, and you will be using, terms that maybe not everyone in the courtroom is familiar with. Let's just spend a few minutes defining some of those terms